Ndidi Nwuneli is a globally recognized social innovator and development leader with over 25 years of experience driving impact across Africa. She is the president and CEO of the One Campaign, a global advocacy organization promoting equity, justice, and economic opportunities. She is the founder of Leap Africa, an African food changemakers, and co-founder of Sahel Consulting Agriculture and Nutrition Limited and AACE Foods. Ndidi serves on several global boards, including the Rockefeller Foundation, Channel Foundation, and Stanbic IBTC Group. A Harvard MBA and Wharton alumna, Ndidi is an author and thought leader and a passionate advocate for sustainable development and leadership in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, Ndidi Nwuneli.
Can we please give her a loud applause as she comes to the stage? Welcome Ndidi Nwuneli as she speaks on climate justice through finance, empowering the most vulnerable.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a wonderful pleasure and privilege to be here. I'm a big fan of Lapo and Dr. Godwin. I have known him for about 25 years. We were both early grantees and partners of Ford Foundation when Lapo was still a nonprofit. Now I'm seeing billions and billions and billions to the glory of God. So thank you, Dr. Godwin. Thank you to his wonderful wife. Thank you to the board. These are great success stories to see a nonprofit become a global organization, to have operations in 34 states. I'm just truly, truly proud of you. We often tell these stories, and oftentimes we forget where we've come from. And I'm just so amazed. Look at God. Well, I'll just get started because time is of the essence. I'm the president and CEO of the One Campaign, and those who don't know the One Campaign, we're a global advocacy organization that was started 21 years ago by Bono, Bobby Shriver, and Jamie Drummond. And what we do is fight for the investments to ensure healthier lives and economic opportunity in Africa. So climate is cross-cutting for us. Why is it cross-cutting? You can't have healthier lives if you don't address the climate challenge. You can't have economic opportunities if you don't address the climate challenge. So I'm not going to repeat what the professor has said, but integral to our work is a recognition that you must see climate as cross-cutting. So you cannot put it in a box, and that's my first message today, that oftentimes we talk about climate finance as if it's distinct. Climate finance is part of any single loan that you give. You can't give a loan to a food producer in Nigeria or even a transport provider in Nigeria and not think about the climate risks. For those of you who were stuck in traffic yesterday in Nigeria, in Lagos, we landed at 6:30 and we didn't get home till almost 11 o'clock, right? And that's classic of climate. Not only did it rain, there was an accident, right? Two things that you understand as risk. But when you're pricing a loan, risk is a component, right? And you have to price climate risk for every loan that you give in this context. Because 13 of the most affected countries in the world that are affected by climate change are on the continent of Africa. So it's not something that's far away, it's something that's key to our work. We have a great presentation. There's a PDF, is Dorcas here who has a copy, or do you need me to send you the copy? Where is the team? Is Dorcas here? Do you have it? Okay. Okay. All right. I'll just continue talking. When we get it, we'll put it on. So basically, as we think about the work that we do at One, we really believe that climate impacts so much of what we do. Not only are we thinking about how it affects life expectancy in Nigeria. How does climate change affect life expectancy? Heat, right? Sometimes temperatures have gotten to up to 100 degrees in Nigeria, right? That affects us. We also know that flooding directly relates to higher rates of diarrhea, higher rates of malaria, and we actually have calculated about 250,000 deaths per year just linked to climate change. Okay, awesome. The presentation is up, so You don't have to hear my voice anymore. We can just proceed. So as I mentioned, climate justice really affects different groups of people. It affects women, it affects smallholder farmers, it affects low-income households. And oftentimes we forget that microfinance is so integral to these populations: the lowest income households, the smallholder farmers, and women. But climate justice, as we think about it on our continent, affects so many of us. In fact, it's been calculated and estimated that 5% of GDP per year is affected by climate change and can continue to push us into extreme poverty. When we look at the African context, about 43 million people will be pushed into additional poverty if we do not address the climate challenge. Now, at One, we've done some very interesting work on this. One was called the Climate Finance Files, and the Climate Finance Files actually showed how much discrepancy there is between what people say they're going to invest in climate and what they actually do. I'm not going to call out some of the states in Nigeria that are making very large pronouncements. I'll focus on other parts of the world. With Climate Finance Files, we looked at all the commitments countries had made, and we followed the money. Where did the money end up? First of all, only about 5% of the money ended up where it said it was going. The most of the money ended up in other places: a hotel in Spain, a ice cream bar in Italy, and even a coal mine in another country. So I challenge us with the point that we need more data to hold people accountable, because when we come on stage and say we're spending billions and billions and billions, where does the money end up? So that's a very important role that we have to play as civil society. The second report we released was called Climate Finance Hypocrisy. And why is the climate finance hypocrisy really important? Because some countries say, do this way, and they don't do it. And oftentimes, many people forget where we've come from as a people. Don't put the standards of Europe on Nigeria today. Don't expect what is going on in the Netherlands to be the same as Nigeria today. And this is a very important point I want to underscore for policymakers here. We have to push back. I'll use an example. I work, as you know, and I used to work in agriculture. And I go to conferences all over the world, and people say, dairy is bad, cattle are bad, milk is bad. How many of you have heard that? Cows cause climate change. Don't invest in dairy production. And I tell them, unfortunately, you can say that today. Dairy production is such an important part of our culture in Nigeria. We haven't even hit the spectrum of where we should be in terms of meat consumption and dairy production. So don't set your standards on us. We should have different standards of development. The same goes to ESG requirements. Yes, it is important to be on that pathway to where you have ESG achieved. But the cost of ESG today on the average Nigerian business, if you expect them to operate on the standard of the German business, is unacceptable. We cannot expect that, right? We have to demonstrate that we're on that pathway and we're making the investments, but not those requirements where you're closing your doors to our businesses and our products and our services because we're not meeting the standards that you're setting. So that's my second message. Data, no need for universal standards at the moment. And the countries that are pushing back, like India, like Brazil, have shown that they can be on that pathway to sustainability. And so this is very important for our work. And as we think about the climate finance hypocrisy, and if you can show that page, it is really important because it showed that there was so much hypocrisy. $2.7 trillion was spent by rich countries on fossil fuel subsidies. Meanwhile, they're expecting us to spend nothing, right, on this. And they're saying switch completely to a sustainable economy. And we will, but we're on that pathway. And we have to have clear milestones. So let me say what the urgent need for action is. The state of affairs have been shared by a professor. There's a sense of urgency that every single player has a role to play in the climate, finance, sustainability landscape. The first call to action is that we really need to, number one, embed it in everything we do when it comes to finance. Do not put microfinance and finance for climate in different boxes. They have to be integrated. In many contexts, we'll say they have to be a substantial piece of your risk assessment, of your pricing, but also of your sustainability matrix. We need to ensure that we are not thinking differently about how this works. But as we think about this sense of urgency, I want to underscore that it's important to also push for a fair financing platform, and one has taken this on. How many of you know that in Africa we pay 5 times more for debt than other parts of the world? I know none of you want to hear that because you're also part of the industry. But we have taken this on at the G20. Why have we taken this on at the G20? This is the first time Africa is hosting the G20, South Africa is hosting the G20. And we have looked at data that just looks at sovereign debt, borrowing across the world. African countries pay 9.8%. Asian countries pay 6.8%. Germany, the US, 2% for debt. That's 5 times more. Why? Why do we pay more for debt? The perception of risk. The perception of risk. We call it an unfair perception. We call it a bias. We say that you put the risk on our countries higher than risk anywhere else. Why? There's bias, there's racism. We don't provide enough success stories like the Lapo success stories. We don't elevate our voices, and we're not providing the data that the industries need. And so we've taken on this fight at One Campaign, and we believe we must win, and we need to partner. So that is integral to our climate finance sustainability fight. Because if we don't demonstrate that we have data, we have strategies, we have mitigation, we will continue to even pay more for finance, especially if we're not addressing climate as an integral part on how we address this. So let's go quickly through the suggestions that we have. We must continue to put women at the foundation of our climate finance, sustainable financing, because they're most affected, but because they're also part of the solution, and they're part of changing narratives. Let's move to the next slide. We must also continue to understand that agriculture and farmers who are most affected by climate change are also part of the solution, and that if our strategies and our approaches are integrated in the way we engage with women and smallholder farmers, with how we price for their drought resistance, how we price for their farms, what insurance mechanisms we embed in our climate finance loans, and I assume that all of you already have insurance as part of the loan mechanism. That has to go hand in hand. The insurance industry has to be talking with the finance industry, and together you must develop products that ensure that we manage risk, because there are so many instruments for hedging risk now. There are guarantees, there are mechanisms that allow you, and they are subsidized by global players, and we have to take advantage of them. And then beyond smallholder farmers, we must continue to partner and integrate to support SMEs. And insurance is embedded, guarantees are embedded, and all the mechanisms that low-income households, especially the small businesses, experience have to be part of what we do. And then what is required? What is required? We must hold wealthy countries accountable. And for those of you who understand the international development landscape, what I have learned is that if we don't hold them accountable and push them, we will not move forward. In this role that I've had for almost 2 years, I've learned something. I've learned that it's not in any best interest for Nigeria to get its act together. It's not in anybody else's best interest. Why? Many of the people in the development sector have benefited from Africa not speaking with one voice. They have benefited from us not knowing the worth of our critical minerals. They have benefited from us not knowing the worth of many of the products and services that we provide. Even many of our musicians and artists who are doing so well on the global stage are still not getting the best returns on their creativity because we do not fully understand our worth. And so as we think about the future, we must hold wealthy countries accountable for their commitments to supporting our continent when it comes to climate-smart financing. Now, it means that we need instruments from them, we need guarantees from them, and we need subsidies from them, because we did not contribute to the climate crisis, but we're facing the brunt of it. So as a microfinance bank and as a finance institution, who can provide those guarantees? And there are many development institutions around the world who can come alongside as partners. So that's one. Then what about financial institutions ourselves? What is the role of financial institutions? Can we go to the next slide? We must also do our part in unlocking the potential there. So wealthy countries have a role to play in terms of managing risk. But we also must manage risk. And this is where public, philanthropic, and private sector engagement should come together in terms of real and timely data, in terms of weather information, in terms of insurance, and in terms of hedging strategies. The private sector must also play a role. Now, this is really when we think about unlocking resources for Africa, for Africans. I recently learned that about $3 trillion worth of African money, legitimate money, not stolen money, legitimate money is outside the continent. Why are we keeping our money outside the continent instead of bringing it to Lapo Microfinance Bank? Why? Because we also don't trust that our money in our institutions can deliver impact for our people. We have to change that. I was just in Hong Kong for the Asia Philanthropy Forum, Venture Philanthropy Forum Conference, and the theme was Asian Wealth for Asian Development, hinged on Asian values. Can the next conference we have be focused on Nigerian wealth for Nigerian development, hinged on Nigerian values? We can do it. We need Nigerian money, good money, building Nigeria. We need to partner with legitimate institutions that are demonstrating a return on investment, that are hinged on integrity and transparency. And this is where the private sector must play a role. What gives me hope? All hope is not lost. There are many, many bright spots. I'm seeing lots of innovation in the ecosystem. I'm seeing lots of partnerships emerging. I'm seeing adaptation instruments that are being leveraged even on our continent. And Africa is already at the forefront of this. I am seeing adaptation instruments that are yielding 10x return on investment. I'm also seeing movements, and I'm part of one of the movements called Dandelion. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Dandelion movement. It was started by Mary Robinson, and it's such an inspiring initiative. Please check it out. The Dandelion movement believes that women must become climate champions, and that women must partner with other women and men, male dandelions exist, to spread the word that we must own the future of our own development and push for a safer world. I'm also hopeful because African Development Bank is, through the Africa Development Fund, putting money into climate smart investments. And LAPO should benefit from ADF 17. I am currently an ADF 17 champion, going around the world, making sure that the African Development Bank can raise billions of dollars. And at the forefront of their agenda is climate smart financing and subsidized financing for those who are committed to climate resilience. So please support ADF 17. And finally, what gives me hope? Innovations. There are lots of innovations across the world and in Africa that are demonstrating what you can do to hedge, what you can do to invest, what you can do to reduce risk, and what every business must have as a key component of their work. So as I round up, I'll show a final video. I mentioned to you that all over the world, I'm going around in my role, changing narratives about Africa, telling positive stories to reduce the cost of capital, to ensure that people know that we are innovators, we are driving change, and we are moving our countries forward. And we put together a video in partnership with a Nigerian, very talented Nigerian poet on Africa and why Africa is ready and open for business. So I'm ending with this and saying to you, and you watched the video, that we must take a stand on leveraging success stories, elevating our voices, incorporating our data and insurance, but also making sure that climate is not something we put aside, but integrate, because we must become climate champions. So please play the video with some sound.
Interesting, but stay with me. You mean Lagos, where fintech rises before the sun? Or Joburg, where Charles LeBron didn't walk? Or Dakar, where rhythm breaks the rules? Risk? No. This is return. Return on belief. On the girl in Enugu sketching dreams which are cool. On the boy in Soweto coding futures from a shared laptop. And a Nigerian musician making dreams from a stolen laptop. On the market woman in Kumasi who knows profit without spreadsheets. on justice. For once, we know how to build with bruises, remix scarcity into rhythm. We stretch coins into companies, our sweat, blood, and bodies. We take what the world throws away and say, not so fast, Abiku. We reinvent. You still don't get it. This is not aid. This is alignment. You don't donate to us. You partner, or you get left behind. Because the continent moves quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. So your hesitation is your loss. Because what we call hustle, you call the innovation 20 years later. We are not waiting for green lights. We are building roads on red. We are not fragile. We are anti-fragile. Our wounds became weapons. Our delays became data. Our waiting made us wise. Africa doesn't need your charity. Africa is your clarity. On where the future breathes. On where the world resets. On where value multiplies like cassava after rain. So if you fear risk, don't come. But if you're looking for a return, on imagination, on resilience, on tomorrow, welcome. Welcome to Africa.
So the future belongs to us, to Lapo and to all the visionary leaders who will take a change and a stand to create the future we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May we please ask that you remain on stage as I welcome our co-founder, Mrs. Elizabeth Ngozi Ehigiamuswe, to come present this award. But if you thoroughly enjoyed that presentation, if you are proud to be African, if you are proud to be here and excited about the future, please give Mrs.